welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Loudin Thomas, author of These Blue Mountains. Sarah, welcome back to History Through Fiction, the podcast.
Thank you. I love being on your podcast.
Well, let's start with Hedda Schlegel. Who is she, and how did you choose her to tell this story?
Well, Hedda is a German woman. This is an interesting story. It's the first time I've written a character from another country. When I wrote These Tangled Threads, which was my last novel, I did a lot of research into the flood of 1916 in Western North Carolina. And I stumbled across this story of a World War I German prisoner of war encampment in Hot Springs, North Carolina. And I was just like, my gosh, that's fascinating. I had no idea. These were not German soldiers, they were civilians who happened to be in US waters when war broke out, and the United States said, welcome, you'll be staying here for the duration. We know about the Japanese internment camps during World War II, but this also happened in World War I. So I had to, when you're researching a novel and you find something that's fascinating but doesn't fit your novel, you just have to put it aside and say, okay, I'm going to come back to that. So I did come back to it, and what originally enticed me about this story was that these sailors, these German sailors who were in Hot Springs, North Carolina, built a Bavarian village out of flood debris. So the flood had left boards and sticks and just tons of debris, and they built this spectacularly beautiful. Actually, have this is the book that tipped me off, and there these photographs of this village that they built are just amazing. That's a carousel that they built out of flood
Mhm.
debris. It worked. It actually went around.
What's the title, just for those that are listening on audio?
The German Invasion of Western North Carolina
Okay.
by Jacqueline Burden Pager. So I saw these pictures, like, all right, so I got to do something with this village. But when I dug into this book, there's this, in the very beginning of it, is this story about a German woman whose brother had been one of these prisoners of war. And he had gone missing. He had just kind of evaporated. They knew he had been on the ship, they knew he had been taken prisoner, and then they didn't know what happened to him after that. It had been 15, 16 years. They assumed he was dead. They had gotten notice that most likely he was dead, but they didn't know what had happened. And this woman in Germany opened a magazine, and in this magazine was a photograph of the German ambassador putting a wreath on a monument to the soldiers. This is the clip that I read for this podcast, and she's looking at the picture, and there's all these little white crosses with the names of the sailors, and her brother's name was on the cross in the forefront of the picture, and that's how they discovered what had happened to her brother. And I was like, well, that's I can't make that up. That's that's fantastic. So I took the idea of this sailor who had gone missing, and I made him a fiance and a woman in Germany who has been pining away for him for 15 years. And she sees this photograph, and she decides to go to America and see if she can recover his remains and bring them back to Germany. And of course, she gets there, and again, conveniently, history cooperated. It turned out that they actually did relocate the remains of some of the sailors who had died in this camp. So they were disinterring bodies, and in the book, when they disinter her fiance's coffin, he's not in it. There's a woman in it. So now she's got to figure out what happened to Fritz, and who's this woman, and why is she in his coffin. So it's also the 1930s. She's a German in America. Hitler has just become chancellor in Germany. So yeah, it just went from there, and it's been so much fun.
Yeah, definitely a lot of great story elements there. Sounds like it almost wrote itself, a little
Yeah.
creativity, but I'm always interested in the history. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about, well, first of all, you brought up these camps. Was
Yeah.
there a difference between prisoner of war camps and the civilian German camps, or were they one and the same?
Um, so they were considered prisoners of war. So yeah, they were the same. They were, like I said, sailors who just happened to be taken prisoner while they were in America. And it was reading the history was interesting because they actually did let some of them go home at some point. Um, but they had to put them somewhere. And there was this defunct hotel in Western North Carolina that had kind of fallen on hard times. So they actually, the officers, sailors, officers, actually got to stay in a beautiful hotel, but they also built barracks, and the everyday sailors would have been in those. And it was the book of title of the book is The German Invasion, because there were actually more sailors brought to Hot Springs than there were residents of Hot Springs. So they were very nervous initially when all these German sailors and were at war, and they put a big fence around the property. But they kind of quickly figured out that these were just regular people. And there was actually an entire orchestra that had been on the ship that was taken prisoner. And they would come out every Sunday and they would play music. And the townspeople would come out they would bring chairs out to the other side of the fence and listen to this orchestra play. And the sailors went into the community and worked. And it actually, in a lot of ways, became a beautiful relationship between the Germans and the locals.
Well, that's interesting. I've definitely heard of these engagements, community engagements with World War II prisoner of war camps.
Mm-hmm.
I was not aware of them during World War One. Um, you at the in your excerpt that you read, there's these sort of memorial or grave sites, and I'm curious to know, are there actual memorials for German POWs that died on American soil during that time?
That the monument that I mentioned in the excerpt, you can go see it. It is at Riverside Cemetery in Asheville, North Carolina. It's still there today, and you can definitely go there and see it. They did a memorial to them at Riverside Cemetery. There were actual graves up in Hot Springs at an Oddfellows cemetery there, and those are the bodies that they disinterred and relocated to somewhere in Tennessee for a reason that no one seemed to know. I tried to find out, like, why did they decide to move them, and it was a government decision that no one understood. But they disinterred the bodies, put them on a train, took them to Tennessee, and reburied them there. So yeah, there are monuments to these soldiers. There was a typhoid outbreak that is how they ended up dying, and I think in retrospect, there was a lot of regret over how they were treated.
Maybe you could put together a little reader tour around your book.
Oh, that's
Like,
actually a great idea,
yeah.
because there's some great Asheville sites. There's Riverside Cemetery with the monument. Hedda Schlegel stays at what is now the Thomas Wolfe Memorial. Thomas Wolfe's mother, Julia, ran a boarding house in Asheville, my old Kentucky home, and Hedda stays there. So I worked in a little Thomas Wolfe into this. So yeah, there's lots of great. She even mentions Biltmore Estate, because you can't mention Asheville without Biltmore.
Hmm. So Hedda is a pianist, and you have also art playing a role in this novel. Can you talk about how music and art are intertwined in this historical novel?
I loved making my characters artistic, musical. There's another character who's a really good artist. I brought in some Annie and Joseph Albers, who were artists in Germany and actually ended up at Black Mountain College in Asheville. I am not artistic. I'm I always say I'm musically challenged, and yeah, my art is writing, and I that is an art, and I'm pretty good at it, I think. But I've always sort of envied people who have the gift for music or really beautiful art. So that was really fun for me to kind of live vicariously through my characters a little bit. And it also let me bring in Black Mountain College, which is another neat piece of history here in Western North Carolina. This was an an arts college. It was very independent, very free thinking, kind of alternative thinking college that was originally located at what is now well, even then it was the Blue Ridge Assembly YMCA camp. And at one point, I worked at Black Mountain Home for Children, and the location of the college was just the second location of the college was just up the street from where I worked. So I kind of had this college, an awareness of it. And to have Hedda, who is a pianist and has never really been able to fulfill her dreams of being a concert pianist, and then an artist who's had to, do his day job instead of pursuing his art, to give them both access to Black Mountain College and let them begin to explore what it looks like to be a musician, to be an artist, was just fun for me.
Can you also talk about the landscape and the importance of not just the landscape to this novel, but to your brand in general? Again, in the excerpt, you kind of read about the juxtaposition between the Alps, where Hedda is originally from, and then the Blue Ridge Mountains, where she comes to. And you have a really nice description of what it's like in Appalachia there. Can you talk about the importance of that and just what it means to you and why it's included in your novels?
Yeah, when people ask me what I write, I always say I write historical Appalachian. That's my genre. I am a seventh generation West Virginian, so my roots in Appalachia go back pre-Civil War. We family settled in the state when it was still Virginia, and so I just have this deep passion for this place. I think Appalachia is the most beautiful place in the world. And my stories initially, my stories were largely set in West Virginia, but my editor finally said, Appalachia actually covers more than just West Virginia. So I've expanded into North Carolina. I've done a little Kentucky, and I just like this part of the world is so often misunderstood, and there's so many stereotypes around Appalachia and hillbillies, and so I love being able to share the beauty of this part of the world and celebrate the people of this part of the world. And it's kind of in my blood and in my DNA. And I think if I had to sit down and write a beautiful scene about a desert, I'd struggle. I know there's great beauty there, but this is just part of me. So it comes very naturally to talk about it. And it's such a cozy landscape, almost insular at times because of the way the mountains just make navigation difficult in the area. So that gives lots of room to explore.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I went to college in West Virginia. My sister lives in Roanoke. I've gone to the Smoky Mountain National Park and done hiking there. It's just really beautiful, and it's got its own flair to it. And um,
More biodiversity than anywhere else in the United States.
yeah. Well, let's talk about your other job. You are the director of a museum. I find it kind of interesting because a lot of the authors I have on the podcast have other jobs, but they're for some reason they're in corporate America or
Right.
something unrelated. This seems related because you're in history. So tell me about how you came to become the director of museum and what your work is like there.
So the Mitford Museum in Hudson, North Carolina, Jan Karen writes the Mitford novels, and she is from Lenore, North Carolina, and she had an opportunity to start a museum here. And it's actually not as much about history. It's more we talk about it being a literary museum because it's really about kind of her personal history, a little bit of local history, and then about her books and how she came to write the books. So I actually got to know Jan while I was a fundraiser for a children's ministry in Black Mountain, North Carolina, and she was a supporter of the ministry. And she started talking about this museum and what she hoped to do, and I was like, that sounds like that would work well with being an author. And it just all worked out that we were able to relocate and come here and be part of the museum. And so it is nice to have a day job that lends itself more to the literary world. And we do a literary, we call it Get Lit Literary Lab. So it's a literary workshop every fall. And I get to call up my author friends and be like, hey, do you want to come be part of this? So it is nice to have a job that connects more with what I do, my other full-time job.
Is that something that's accessible then beyond just the regional? Can people join some of these events on Zoom?
We actually are talking about doing that because her fan base is worldwide. And visitors have come to little old Hudson, North Carolina from all 50 states. And actually, we've had some international visitors, Australia, England, France, because people are just incredibly passionate about her books. So we have talked about maybe doing something where we would be able to have digital outreach to people who can't come visit, but that's down the road.
Well, can you talk more about your work as essentially a full-time author? I mean, you're constantly coming out with new books. You have another book, as we talked before this interview started, that's coming out in 2026. You're probably already thinking of another idea beyond that,
Yes.
um, while also trying to manage a museum. What are, I guess, some of the challenges of doing that, and how do you balance both jobs, in order to continue to pursue your interests and your
Yeah.
passions?
Well, number one, I don't have children. So it's funny when I was kind of getting started as a writer, I would have all these friends who were stay-at-home moms. And I was like, man, that sounds great. Like to be a stay-at-home mom and you can just write and you got to take care of the kids, but you're at home so you can write and you can focus on your and then my brother and sister-in-law um, brought they had my niece and they were also fostering a little girl, so they came to spend a long weekend with us, and we had four adults in the house with two children under like around 2 years old. And at the end of the weekend, I put out a global apology to stay at home moms because it's like I I don't know how, like, this is crazy. I don't know how you write. I don't know how you go to the bathroom, much less sit down and write your book. Um, so I had always had that kind of idea of how it would be fun to be able to stay home and just write. But when you've got when you want to be a writer and you're not uh, John Grisham or Francine Rivers, you have to do something else to pay the bills. And I think that if you when you find the right job, they can work together. Even when I was at the children's home in fundraising, I had incredibly supportive coworkers who understood and who celebrated and enjoyed the writing. So you just find ways for them to work together and fit together, and you don't watch much television, and you don't have many other hobbies. And I always say, if you people who want to be writers, if you cannot do it, just don't. Like if you can stand to not do it because it takes time and energy and it's heartbreaking at times and it's joy filled at times, but all in all, it's just got to be something that you love so much that you can't not do it, which is where I land.
One of your books recently was a finalist for the Sella Awards. I failed to write down the title. Which one was it? And can you tell us
These tangled threads.
okay, what is that award and what does that mean to you?
So Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference is it's actually just it's kicked off yesterday. We're doing this at the end of May, and this is when the conference runs. So this is an award. I've actually had the SELA Book of the Year was The Right Kind of Fool, which is like 3 or 4 books ago. And awards are funny. I have a lot of conflicting feelings about awards because I want them. Like I want to get awards because when you get an award, it's this um it like says yes, you should be doing this. You're doing it well. It just gives you a little confirmation that this is good. But at the same time, it can feel really bad to not win an award, and it can feel bad to be a finalist with a really dear friend, and then you're like, well, can we just tie? Because I don't want to win and I don't want to lose. So awards are they're very nice, and I'm grateful for them, but I try not to put too much into them because they're also subjective. And I have seen books win awards that I was like, I didn't really love that book. And then I've seen books not win awards that I thought were the best books in the top 5 books I'd ever read. So I just take them with a grain of salt, and I'm thankful that I get nominated and occasionally win one.
It is interesting though, isn't it? I now as a publisher, I have to, how many books do we submit? Where do we submit them? Is it
Right.
worth the submission fees?
Yes.
And then trying to explain to the author, well, this doesn't mean anything. You know, you still wrote a great book. Meanwhile, like crossing my fingers, come on.
Right.
I was at the IBPA Book Awards last week, and two of our books were finalists. One won, and the other one didn't. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it provides a sense of legitimacy to
Yeah.
what we're doing. But at the same time, you just don't want to put too much into that because there's so much subjectivity and so many other. It's kind of like a popularity contest half the
Yeah.
time. So yeah,
I,
it's a
I,
strange
I
thing.
asked my editor really when my first book was about to release. I asked my editor because he said something about it would be nice if it got nominated for some awards, and I said, "Well, does that help sales?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "They're just nice."
Well, and as a publisher, authors want the sticker on
Right.
the title. Well, then I got to go back to the designer and say, "Oh, can you add this?" And then we have to revise all the files, so it can be labor intensive and more expenses as well. And yeah, it doesn't. After the release date, even with awards, it's hard to get renewed attention on those
Yeah.
titles. So, what do you want to let us know what you are working on next?
Okay. Let me think. So the one that the book that I just turned in first round of edits, very first draft, is tentatively titled "These Empty Places," and this is sort of a trilogy. So these Tangled Threads was set around Biltmore Estate, the flood of 1916, which eerily the flood of 2024, which happened about 6 months after the book came out, was worse than the flood of 1916. So these tangled threads, these blue mountains, these empty places, they all have ties to that flood of 1916. And this is just where I did this research for the first book, and I just kept finding fascinating bits of history. Uh, Somebody one time asked me, and they said, "Well, where do you get your ideas? Are you running out of ideas?" I was like, "Are you kidding me?" just look around. The ideas are you trip over them. Um, so this one, these empty places, Lake Toxaway in Western North Carolina. It's a popular resort area. There's a beautiful hotel called the Greystone Inn. As I was researching it, I discovered, and I had known about Lake Toxaway. This is the area I live in. And I discovered that Lake Toxaway sat empty for 40 years. So the flood happened in 1916. The lake was fine, but months later, uh, probably like a month or two later, the flood had put such stress on the dam at the lake that it just gave way. So one afternoon in 1916, the lake suddenly just washed billions of gallons of water from Western North Carolina all the way into South Carolina. Uh, Fortunately, the only casualty was a blind mule. didn't get out of the way. And there is today a restaurant called the Blind Mule in his memory. But as I was reading about this, so that was the little fascinating piece of history. And then it just sat empty for 40 years. There was just an empty lake. It was Lake Toxaway, but there was no lake. But there was this woman, this amazing woman, Lucy Camp Armstrong. She's got lots of names. And she had been she loved Lake Toxaway. She thought it was the most beautiful place she had ever been. She loved it so much that she persuaded her husband to build her a house there by camping, and I'm making little air quotes around the word camping, on the shores. He didn't want to live in North Carolina. He was from Savannah. He's like, I don't want to live there. Let's not build a house there. He challenged her. He's like, if you want to live there so bad, you camp out there one summer and that'll prove it to me. So she basically built like these platforms with massive tents, and I would say glamping would be definitely what was going on, but she did it. And so he's like, fine. And they built what is today the Greystone Inn. It was called Hillmont then. And she was a world traveler. She was a woman who loved to go places. They were very wealthy. And she just stayed at Lake Toxaway, even though there was no lake there anymore, even though the economy went bust with the lake. And she just poured into the community. She sent her workers to college. She provided jobs for people. And she kind of was this one woman salvation for Lake Toxaway. And that was just so fascinating. So she's at the center of the story. And it's the early 1930s, and I have a young couple who have just lost everything in the stock market crash. So they are absolutely destitute, and they come to Lake Toxaway because he's going to get a job in timber. And the character based on Lucy kind of takes them under her wing. And there's missing treasure, there's fraud, there's some time in prison, all sorts of fun challenges for the characters to overcome.
Wow, yeah, very interesting little nugget of history. I doubt, only people in that area
Yeah.
probably know about.
And a lot of them don't. That's my favorite thing, is when somebody reads one of my books and says, oh, I looked that up. Like, that is, when you write historical fiction, that is the thing. The only thing that makes you happier is I had somebody who said, I looked it up and then I went there. I was like, yes.
Nice. Well, Sarah, congratulations on These Blue Mountains, and thank you for joining me once again on the podcast. I can't wait to continue to read the books that you come out with.
Excellent. Ditto.